We like to do what we do on Fridays, which is to welcome Alan Kelly to the studio. We discuss plays for the presidency. Alan is the CEO of the Bethesda-based consultancy Playmaker Systems, and it's sort of the periodic table of political elements, if you will. Plays2run.com is where you can find it. Plays, the numeral 2run.com. Welcome back. Always good to see you.
Good to see you too, Tim.
You missed me last week, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely.
In a remote location.
We had donuts.
Yeah, I know. That's all right. You didn't bring any this week, though, did you?
No. Well, it was late.
Because you were afraid I was going to wipe you out again. I only knew the answers last week because you had written them down.
Not bad.
Well, you wrote them down. I was cheating.
This system can be learned. We teach this at GW. The grad students are on fire with this, and everybody can get this. It's not that hard.
So much smarter than I am, though. I mean, those young people today, those young whippersnappers.
Great students.
I know that you've been writing about this, and in some ways it was something that has already passed, and that was this whole foo-for-ah over what Rush Limbaugh was saying about a woman who had testified in front of Congress. And typically, I don't really get involved so much in media stuff, which is what Rush Limbaugh is all about.
Even though you're on media,
exactly. But I don't criticize other media because, frankly, they throw poop at each other. I mean, when you talk about whether it's MSNBC or Fox or whatever, they have this game that they throw these things back and forth. It's all about getting noticed, and I'm trying not to worry about me getting noticed so much as trying to get news across. That said, what happened to the Rush Limbaugh story is it sort of morphed from whether or not the contraception issue was one of religious right or was a women's health issue into whether or not Rush Limbaugh should be fired for what he said. And we've heard that fight for the last 20 years. But it does bring up something, and I think you point out, and that is a story about the way that this story plays out, because it becomes it's a tail wagging the dog kind of thing. Frame it up for us, if you will.
Well, I don't think we can talk about the politics, and I don't think we can talk about the 2012 race without talking about the media constantly.
Oh, I understand that.
And it does put you in a compromised position. But the media, in a way, is the dark horse. It is the independent party. It is the third party coming in to stir things up.
And you define media as?
Well, earned media. I would say those that are speaking free will, theoretically, those that where messages and minds and motives are being played out,
the reason I asked
not
that question,
paid for.
The reason I asked that question, non-paid for. But if you look at the total amount of people who watch, for example, cable news, you're talking about on a daily basis 2-3 million, maybe 4-5 million people, depending on how big the shows are. That's the total number. Brian Williams on his nightly news has about 7 million viewers.
That's right.
ABC about 7 million. The typical person watching, for example, American Idol, 22 million. Something along those lines.
Just a little bit more than listening to...
But the number of people... Yeah, POTUS, I write this show. But the other idea is that the number of people who get their news from the media, the number of people who get their news from internet... And although that kind of conversation becomes a meme, it becomes very difficult to talk about how the media shapes opinion as opposed to whether or not it is something coming from the grassroots now. And this is one of my concerns, is that if it is loud and it screams, it gets noticed. And I don't know that necessarily it is a careful, responsible discussion of issues, and that's why I be careful. I try to be careful about bringing that into it. I'm more concerned about with what politicians are saying and what other people are saying. And but that said,
the problem is the media are becoming the politicians.
Well, or the politicians. It is becoming difficult to understand the line between entertainment and truth, or entertainment and news coverage. I agree with that.
Right.
Because those lines are being consistently blurred.
Right. And the topic of today and of my blog is Rush Limbaugh. And his 15+ million on-air listeners.
Or 20.
Or maybe 20. This, we're talking about it not... he is somewhat dismissed as an entertainer, but I think that his $15 or $20 million, no pun intended, listeners would regard him as so much an entertainer as an entertaining leader.
I would agree with that, and I will also tell you that having been associated with the radio industry for a long time, I can cite research which indicates that a lot of people who listen to Rush Limbaugh believe he is a credible news source that is outside of the mainstream media, and therefore they turn to him for the quote-unquote truth.
Sure. Just as they do to Jon Stewart. So, last week we have Rush Limbaugh making his derisive comments toward the Georgetown student, and that doesn't go so well for him. He probably goes a little bit too far, and we have the Obama Team Obama very cleverly jumping on it and driving a wedge issue and saying, this is interesting. This really, again, signifies that Mitt Romney is failing a test of leadership. He hardly can stand up to Rush Limbaugh. How would he ever stand up to Ahmadinejad, said David Axelrod. So, again, very savvy, preemptive strike by Obama team, which is classic. We've talked about this before. They're very good at jumping in first and making an issue theirs.
So that's a preemption.
It is a preempt. The play that they ran is a preempt, and we're watching it happen every week now. They're very, very good at it. All Mitt can do to that play that was run against him was run a weak deflect to say, well, it's probably not the best choice of words. Rictan Santorum was only slightly less evasive. But the point I want to get at here is that you have to really start wondering, if you talk about this notion of surrogates, who's the surrogate? Who's the player and who's the puppeteer here in this election? Now, the GOP has traditionally had fantastic and almost pristine command and control of its machines. But now it really is coming apart. And the signal that, or the telltale sign that Rush Limbaugh is a leader of the discussion and is broadly deferred to, indicates that their system is backward, and arguably that it is broken, because they are now deferring to him. So, you wonder who's playing who and what are the appropriate roles.
Well, who is deferring to Rush Limbaugh?
Well, we had two top candidates of his party who are deferring to him. What he did clearly is wrong. You just have to come down on that end of it. It was wrong what he said, and yet no one will really take him on to say that was absolutely bad, because they will alienate 15 million listeners who don't think he's an entertainer, who think he's entertaining, but agree with him and like him. So they can't say anything. Well, that's a major problem, and a sign that the surrogate player, what we kind of call the focal player surrogate relationship, is broken, that the GOP does not have that sort of control. And so in a way, this whole equation is flipped. We're watching now for the first time in a while the Democrats really give the clinic when it comes to influence strategy over the GOP.
Now, as far as this goes, whether, is it Mitt Romney that had the problem with it? And what could he have said if he was just to say that?
It's a good question. I'd have to speculate and put my Mitt Romney hat on, and
one thing you could say is, look, the man apologized. He said a bad thing.
It took him a while to apologize.
Well, my question is, if you say he apologized, it did take him a while, and it may have been disingenuous to apologize because of the fact that he was losing advertisers.
Exactly.
He apologized. He said the wrong thing. He apologized for that. He used bad words. He never should have said it. And then what do you do?
Mitt Romney.
But the problem is that the questions keep coming up. And again, at some point, this becomes the same conversation we've been having for 20 years. It was the same as when Don Imus went out there and said what Don Imus said. And that is, he was being a morning jock, which is what he always does. And then he went roundly excoriated. People jumped on it, and for other reasons. So what happens? He gets fired. And then he winds up collecting from the company that fired him because they broke the contract. He makes money off of that, and he winds up getting another job.
Yeah. The thing is,
this is the game that gets played all the time.
Limbaugh is not a morning jock.
No, he's not.
He's not an entertainer. He's really not even a radio man. He is a politician.
No, he is a radio man. That's his background. He's a jock. He was a music jock. That's how he started.
But his role and what he has become is transcendent. He has clearly moved on beyond that. That is merely his medium. He is a de facto thought leader, and possibly the leading thought leader of the party. And yet, and his image and his visage is getting in the way of the agenda of the nominees who need to secure a nomination and move on.
What about the question, for example, when people ask about his influence in the election, and his influence?
Limbaugh's influence in the election, yeah.
He said that, he has recommended in both, almost every single one of the contests that have been fought so far on the primaries, it has gone the opposite of the way he has suggested. In other words, he doesn't influence or didn't influence the voters there.
I don't know.
Well, in other words, the people he suggested should win didn't win. So, explain to me that kind of an influence.
I don't know. I think I'd have to know more about.
I would agree with you.
his
I would
base.
agree with you, having talked to people that his what he says can be very inconvenient, because what it does, for example, this whole thing now reframe this issue as an issue over whether or not women should be, about it changed the debate from religious rights to something that the Republicans didn't want to talk about, with whether or not it was about sexism, and that became an easy target because Republicans are targets for that, no question about it. I guess what I'm saying is that. Having been in the business long enough, I mean, I've seen this argument play out over and over again, and this is a great opportunity to flog something to death, to get a lot of viewers, to get a lot of people listening, and to light up telephones, because what it does is you bring up an issue that you are going to get an argument about, and it just plays. And what happens is that the serious issues of the day do not get treated.
I think it's a serious issue, though, that there is a leading light and a person of the party who is...
He's not of the party, though. That's my point. He is not a Republican. He's a conservative. He's a conservative talk show host. He's not of the party. He's not an elected official.
I would say you're parsing.
No, well, I mean, we can parse all we want. I'm just telling you.
People would say the same thing about Mitt Romney. No,
Romney's running for office. He's not. He's not hosting a show that's on every day. There's a difference there.
Either way, they are all on the right side of the aisle. They would generally all want to agree that they want to have a candidate who can beat Barack Obama in November, and they're having a very difficult time doing that. And the people who are ostensibly going to get the nomination are having a really hard time asserting themselves and taking control of the discussion and showing authority, even moral authority, over the situation and the players.
I take it back to 1992.
Rush Limbaugh is one of those
Can
players
I tell you something?
that they do not have control over.
1992, Rush Limbaugh called women feminazis. The same thing happened.
He did in the same breath of what happened last week.
But he's been using that for years. He did that in 1992. He had the same problem with George H.W. Bush. I'm telling you, this is the same game playing out as has happened so many times before. And all it does is feed into his ability to get more listeners. Certainly. And I'm just telling you, this is not... It's not something new.
But it is an opportunity, I think, for someone like a Mitt Romney, certainly Santorum, but certainly someone like a Mitt Romney, to stand up and say, that is wrong. This is exactly what I think the electorate is wanting Romney to do, is to grow a real backbone, to show real perspective, to show real social awareness, and call him on it and take moral control
what would that
over
play
the situation.
Be called, so we don't lose track of what this is about? What would that play be called if Mitt Romney came up and did grow the backbone?
Probably a call-out. What Mitt Romney tends to do is do deflex. He tends to run plays that are more middle of the spectrum, which are safe. He doesn't seem to have the sort of the social awareness to go farther out, to run testing plays that are clever or to run attacking plays that are brave. He doesn't have that strategic dimension.
Well, we'll see if he ever does that. It may not be.
A fun discussion.
Plays to Run. Check out the Plays to Run. And I hope you feel better, by the way.
Thank you very much.
It's been going on with the cold there. It's Alan Kelly, of course, always with us. And it's great conversation. Plays2run.com. You'll find it there. Alan, thanks so much. Talk to you next week.
Bye-bye now.